The call came while I was still in uniform. "Ma'am, your stepfather is here. He has an industrial grinder," the voice said. The words landed like a calculated bomb. For a brief second, the world itself seemed to stop. Not because I was afraid, but because I had been waiting for this exact moment for years. I could see it clearly in my mind. Him standing at the dock, jaw tight, hands shaking with entitlement, utterly convinced that whatever my father had built belonged to him now. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't flinch. I glanced at the clock, letting a small, calm smile play across my lips. "Let him grind," I said quietly, almost to myself. "He's just activated the 48-hour security protocol my father put in place. Panic is a luxury reserved for the unprepared. In naval intelligence, being unprepared isn't just a mistake, it's a death sentence." I settled into my workstation. The cold blue glow of the military-grade monitor reflected in my eyes as I entered the override commands. Most people think a maritime container is nothing more than a corrugated steel box. Bradley believed that brute force, friction, and heat could grant him access to $12 million of my father's lifetime labor. He was wrong. That container was not a storage unit. It was a fortress, physical and digital, layered with reinforced alloys and security systems that could withstand intrusion attempts for days. It was precision engineering, it was strategy. Back in Savannah, the whispers had followed me my entire life. People called me the cold, distant daughter, the one who let a predator into her mother's life. My silence at the wedding, they said, was surrender. My lack of protest as Bradley rearranged my father's home was weakness. But silence in my world is not passivity, it is preparation. It is the calm before the storm, the strategic pause before the ambush. I had been observing him for months. Bradley pressing into my mother's grief, measuring every asset, calculating every opportunity. I didn't warn her. I didn't confront him. I watched. In intelligence work, you don't stop a predator at the first sign of predation. You let him step into the trap. You let him commit. And the only exit is full exposure. Bradley misjudged me. He assumed my military service had made me rigid, inattentive, overly structured. It had done the opposite. It had turned me into a ledger. Every time he asked about my father's retirement accounts, noted. Every suggestion to liquidate my father's unused assets, logged. Every sly insinuation, every gentle nudge to manipulate my mother, recorded, clinical, precise. Anger wasn't loud, it was stored in encrypted rows of data, every entry a line item on the debt he was accruing. When the lockdown protocol initiated, I pulled up the dock feed. Sparks flew from the grinder in the heavy Georgia mist, illuminating Bradley's face with erratic, desperate bursts of light. He looked small, amateurish, like a man attempting to decode a masterwork with nothing but assumptions and arrogance. My father had anticipated this. He believed love meant leaving clarity, not confusion. The glow of my terminal painted a sunrise made of numbers, evidence, and quiet retribution. This was not revenge. This was accounting. I had 48 hours to reach Savannah, and by the time I landed, Bradley's debt would be fully collected. I didn't close my eyes on the flight. I watched the coastline blur beneath the wing of the transport plane, grey streaked with deep blue, mirroring the datasets I had been auditing for hours. My father had built an empire on that stretch of coast. $25 million of dockland forged from iron, salt water, and relentless grit. His hands were a map of his labour, scarred, calloused, honest. Bradley's hands were soft, manicured, expressive only when reaching for something that didn't belong to him. He had appeared in my mother's life less than a year after the funeral, introduced himself as Bradley Smith, a humble widower with low, rehearsed tones of shared grief. He walked into our home with flowers, performative respect, and calculating eyes that measured square footage while offering condolences. My mother, Stephanie, saw a lifeline. I saw a shadow stretching across my father's legacy. Weeks before my father died, I had sat on the back porch with him. He was a man of few words, believing silence often carried more intent than speech. He handed me a heavy brass key and a set of coordinates to a container at the far end of the docks. "Some things don't belong in the house," he said. "They're too important to be misunderstood." I thought he was paranoid. I was wrong. It was protection. Bradley had spent months spinning a narrative. To my mother, I was secretive, distant, rigid. He reframed my father's trust in me as evidence that Gary didn't trust her. "Why would he hide 12 million from you?" he whispered. "Unless your daughter convinced him you couldn't handle it." Gaslighting at its finest. Bradley made me the villain while positioning himself as the protector. He reframed theft as justice, manipulation as concern. But every lie, every maneuver, every whisper into my mother's ear, I recorded. I archived it. Every line was a signature on his own undoing. When the doc called, my mother believed the break-in was righteous. I watched her warmth fade into guarded suspicion during our weekly video calls. Bradley thought he had isolated her from me. He didn't know I had documented every word, every act, every deceit. I landed in Savannah at first light, the Atlantic fog heavy in the air. I didn't go to the house. Going there would have been a tactical mistake, giving Bradley time to rehearse his concerned husband act. Instead, I drove to a nondescript office near the historic district to meet Elias, my father's oldest friend and a federal investigator. He didn't offer condolences. He slid a manila folder across the desk. "Your father anticipated this," he said. "He documented everything, every move Bradley made, every word he spoke." 3 hours of cross-referencing dock surveillance with Bradley's digital footprint revealed a masterpiece of incompetence hidden behind arrogance. Bribed dock workers, cash handoffs, security footage, time-stamped events, all federal offences. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a criminal investigation. I initiated the financial counterstrike. As successor trustee of the Gary Dockland Living Trust, I contacted the bank. I froze every account Bradley shared with my mother. No permission asked. Evidence presented. Clinical, decisive, complete. Bradley thought the grinder would give him $12 million. He was right about the assets, but wrong about the prize. The real value was the bait. Inside the container were files, records, and digital proofs. Apex Maritime Solutions 2014, a ghost company siphoning $8 million from my father's business. Bradley hadn't just married my mother for comfort. He had married her to finish a decade-old crime. Back home, he sat in my father's chair, glass of scotch in hand, whispering promises of a fresh start. I stepped into the living room. "That fresh start is cancelled," I said, voice flat and precise. I played the doc footage, I displayed the financial evidence, I handed my mother her father's final letter. Sirens began to wail in the driveway. Authorities, already coordinated, didn't need to force entry. Bradley's confidence evaporated. The predator realized too late that the cage was locked. Convicted of interstate fraud, embezzlement, and property damage, he was neutralized, legally, fully. My mother, Stephanie, reclaimed her voice. Together, we opened the container. Inside weren't just assets. There was my father's presence, his foresight, and his legacy. I used the resources to establish the Gary Legacy Fund, offering scholarships and maritime training for the children of dock workers who had stood by him. At the far end of the docks, watching the sunrise paint the Atlantic in shades of copper and gold, I felt the weight of my uniform finally ease. The mission of the Silent Sentinel was complete. To anyone who has ever been called cold, rigid, or difficult, your silence is not surrender. it is strategy. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is honor. Boundaries do not close doors, they open futures. Justice does not need applause, truth does not need witnesses. The gates are secure, the ledger is balanced, the accounting is done,